Welcome to Inforonics Support Weekly. I'm Matt Hooper.
I'm Scott Taylor.
Scott, last week we talked about the phone system upgrade that we had and the challenges that were undertaken then. It was a really impressive thing to me to think about all the logistics that happens, but also, too, how we were so focused on getting the value added from the features that we wanted.
Absolutely.
So there was a lot of risks.
Oh, yeah.
But we were driven to do this by a strong return on our investment. And immediately out of the gate, we were focused on getting those feature functions driven by us. So I like that. I think that was very, very impressive. It was a good podcast.
Yep.
This week, we're going to talk about IT outsourcing and the risks that are involved with it.
Okay.
As you know, Inforonics is an outsourcing company.
Yes. Yes, I hear this quite often.
And so, for us to tackle this issue, I think is pretty bold, but I think it's important. There's not going to be an outsourcing company who does everything perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
We always are trying to manage expectations of our customers, be forward-thinking, and really drive innovation from a outsourcing perspective that is stable, trustworthy, dependable, but also feature-rich. Mm-hmm. Just like we talked about with the phone system, we needed it to work. The calls had to come in, but we wanted the additional reporting capabilities. We wanted the integration to the dashboards. We wanted the capabilities for the queue. We wanted our code in English.
Yes.
Yes. all the benefits.
And I'll admit, trying to convince somebody that outsourcing is a good idea for them is probably one of the hardest things for us to tackle. And ultimately, there's people out there who are open to outsourcing, and then there are people who are not. And sometimes we have to talk to people who are not open to the idea of outsourcing, and trying to convince them or trying to let them know that why we are a superior choice, why it's a good thing to outsource, can be a very difficult uphill battle.
Yeah, it really is. And I've worked on both sides of the fence. I've worked for manufacturing outsourcing companies, and in that company, I was using outsourcing from IT. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of relationship issues you got to manage. In my recent blog, I talked about when you're evaluating whether you can outsource or not, you have to really examine yourself. Are you a person who can outsource? And I think from our perspective, we want our clients to understand that this is a step that they're going to take, and they need to really think about it from a standpoint of risk, because there are risks involved. We think of risks about their data, for instance. Who owns the data that we collect? Mm-hmm. What is the risk to them of the data that we collect? Sometimes we're talking to people about their personal information, or maybe credit card information,
Absolutely.
Things like that.
Yep.
So by lack of process within our own organization, we could introduce really a significant risk to our client base. Mm-hmm. So let's pick that first one then, yep. Data. What are we doing to manage our clients' risk, mitigate our own liabilities and risks?
Yep. Well, first off, we have to understand when we're talking to a client, what is the data that we're collecting and what are we doing with that data? Right now, we do collect credit card information from clients over the phone, but we do not enter any of that credit card information within our own systems. Right there, that's a huge liability. We're just not set up for it. Mm-hmm. That's not the type of company we are. They, for this client, they do have their own back-end processing, their own processes and things like that, which is great. So we will utilize their system. But so the very first thing for us to do when looking at data is what is the data and where is it going to live, and are we really willing to hold on to that data for a client?
So right out of the gate, we're thinking about a VPN connection to their systems with controlled access points that are going to allow us to take the data we hear on the phone or on the email or whatever and pump it right into their system. We're not storing it, even though we're SAS 70 and we're meeting all those other compliance. It's just mitigating our liabilities.
Absolutely.
It's allowing the customer to manage that risk themselves.
Yes.
So what about the risk of, say, Agent 1 leaving our company or changing from one client to the other? How do we manage their access into that system?
Well, it matters who the client is. It matters what sort of information we're collecting. In many instances, we will deploy single sign-on solutions on behalf of our clients within our own systems. What that means is that an agent who's accessing a ticketing system or accessing something via a web UI, they never even know what their login is. We have it set up so that they click a link on the back end, that information is pulled from the database and then logs them seamlessly into the application. That's ultimately that's one of the best ways for us to protect information. That way, if there's turnover, if agents are switching teams, we don't necessarily have to go back to that client and ask them to change information, because that's a really very difficult thing to do. You know, if we can't be doing those things, or if we need to actually access a direct system, well, you know, that's where putting in point-to-point VPNs or putting ACLs into place on the client's end, so that we're accessing only the pieces of infrastructure that we should be accessing.
ACLs are access control lists.
Yep. Goes into play. You know, here at Inforonics, we have all of our access is also ACL'd out, so they always know what IPs we're going to be coming from. So it's, you know, if we were at home and trying to access the system, well, ultimately we're not going to be able to reach those systems, because the processes are put into place to recognize our IPs and let us in.
So those single point of entries, translating some of the usernames, we're not even handing a card or a username and password to these agents. They have an interface they're provided with, they click through, and they're then given into access. So that allows us to control the information. It's, again, mitigating that level of risk.
Yep.
Now, with the customer and the customer interaction that can happen, another huge risk is how do we manage what customers are expecting, and how do we translate that back to customers? Let's say that we talked about in the past couple of podcasts, people will email us, they'll call us. That's not always the way. Sometimes they're posted on forums or things like that. What are we doing to manage the customer interaction on behalf of the customer who has created this product?
Well, I mean, you know, phone and email are the two most common ways that people are going to be reaching out to us. But, you know, as a technology company, we have to be open and looking for new ways to assist our clients in terms of the support they want to provide. Forums is a great way to be doing that.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, because that is a risk, right? If I'm a product company and I'm not hearing the feedback, or I'm not hearing the disdain of my consumers of my product, I'm at risk in not innovating my product and creating the new feature functions that they're going to be looking for. So if I don't have that continual feedback and loop from my outsourcer, from all levels of how a consumer might talk about it, then I definitely want to mitigate that risk. I know for myself, an initiative I have here at Inforonics is to start watching the social channels, to start watching our clients' stream of communication about their tech support. And if someone says, you know, XYZ tech support is horrible, and we're doing the tech support for them, well, that from an executive standpoint is something we need to get proactive about. I don't want to hear it from the client. I want to know about it well before in advance. But what about then, too, from an improvement standpoint? If I've outsourced the operational side of support, and I'm looking now back 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, aren't I at risk that you own all this improvement capability and I don't?
No, not at all. I mean, ultimately, the goal with us in terms of, you know, being on the management side or even on the technical support side is to be working in tandem with that company. We don't want to be company A versus company B. We want to be an extension of their company. We want our names to be talked about by their developers. We want them to be understanding what the issues are that are coming through, what we're working on, and ways that things can be improved upon. So our representatives have quite a bit of interaction with the clients. We do help to control what those interactions are as best we can. Some clients will overuse being able to reach out to an agent, and others won't. So in the very beginning, you have to be very careful about those interactions. One of the key things here is that if an agent learns something from an engineer, that one agent learns something, not everyone else. You always need to make sure that information gets passed around to the entire group of people. So that's why we do try to control those communications both ways, but ultimately we do want communication to be going back and forth. But our client services manager is also a very key component in this. They're the ones who are talking to the agents. They're looking at the issues that are coming through. They're making sure that our clients understand the types of trends we're seeing, especially if it's after a new release or something like that.
So, and that's vital too, because now we're documenting it, which is again helping to mitigate the risk. When our customers leave, we can package this stuff up and ship it off to them, which, we've not lost many customers. Usually it's because they get bought by a larger company and they say, oh, well, we already have a major support infrastructure in place. We'll handle this ourselves. But for the most part, when we have these customers in that way, if they go off to the agents by themselves, they're not going to be able to document it and control it. This way, through our processes, which we have a lot of time to spend refining, we have to do it for many different customers. They're usually, truly best practices with a lot more rigors than if they tried to do it themselves. So it truly is a mitigation of risk for them to trust our processes as an outsourcer. At the same time, I think it's vital that we work interactively with our clients, right? If it's just a throw it over the wall situation, they're going to be at risk. We're going to be at risk, right? Because then all of a sudden they're not seeing the value-added relationship that we bring to the table. They're not able to leverage our best practices and thus ultimately translate that into consumer happiness, right?
To be honest, I actually think that most of the clients, so when a client signs with us, they go through a 6 to 8 week implementation process. And I think many of the clients in the very beginning, when we are coming back to them and asking them these questions, or we're asking them to be more specific about certain points that they may be trying to make, I think that in the very beginning they're sort of scratching their heads saying, why does Inforonics have to be so specific, or why are they trying to get this much information from us? And at the end of the 6 to 8 week implementation, they finally understand why we're doing these things and why we're trying to gather so much information from them, and why we're trying to wrap tech support and the processes that we have so completely. And it's ultimately because we have learned a lot, and we've fallen on our knees quite a bit and scraped our knees, and ultimately have learned from those mistakes. And this is what you have to do.
Well, and our support focus is really around very complex, multi-tiered applications or devices that have a very complicated both interface as well as logistics engine or something like this. So they're usually very complex application. In fact, one of the biggest risks to probably most of our clients was we're not going to find an outsourcer who can handle the level of complexity, yet we have many references that help them see, we can handle it because of our methodology. And yet still, too, we have risks of how we communicate with our customers. The risk for us as an outsourcer is obviously if they don't have good practices in their change and release control and what they're doing from a new feature set, it makes it more difficult for us to respond in kind, right?
Absolutely. We work with many mature clients, we work with some immature clients, and ultimately that does show through in terms of their release processes and change control and things like that. And often there are times where a new release will come out and we are not aware of it. It's as simple as that. I don't harbor any resentment to those things. It's a gentle reminder that oftentimes we are the front line for them. We are the face to their customers, and it is in their best interest to make sure that we're adequately armed as best as possible. So
metrics are important then.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to talk about next week. Next week we're going to talk about metrics. Really get into some meat of why they matter, what they should be. We're going to talk about key performance indicators, KPIs, and really talk about the value that they can drive out of an organizational relationship like outsourcing.
Yep, absolutely. Right. And the important thing about data and key performance indicators is it gives you a way that you can mark yourself, and the way that you can show improvement and things like that. Oftentimes in tech support, improvement is hard to see, or it's hard to quantify, and that's where KPIs really are needed so that you can measure those things.
Great. I look forward to next week.
Excellent.
Thanks again, Scott.
Bye-bye.
Thanks all for joining us.